So my parents, they didn't have any money. They couldn't afford nursing care. They're the ones who had to put these hot, scalding blankets on me and listen to their 7-year-old kid in pain from that. So it was a very hard time for them. To cheer me up, one day my father brought home a dog for me, a Cocker Spaniel, a beautiful Cocker Spaniel with long droopy ears. And he jumped up on the bed and he started licking my face. I threw my arms around him. I was in love with him and he was in love with me. And he was such a patient, sweet dog. He used to let me tie his ears in knots on top of his head. And we used to feed him leftovers, and his whole behind would wag while he ate the leftovers, you know. And after about 7 or 8 months, I was able to get out of bed, and my father and mother had saved a little money, and we moved to a real house. Up until now, we've been living in this dark bungalow on Yucca Street in Hollywood. Yucca Street sounds like what it looks like what it sounds like. So we moved to this little bit of property, and there were trees and fields, and Rhapsody and I, just the first day we were there, we ran all over the place. The second day we were there, we went out to celebrate that we were in a new house, and we ate Chinese food, and we came home and gave Rhapsody the leftovers, the way we always did. And he choked on a bone or something, and he died. And I was heartbroken. By now I was 8 years old, and I was I loved this dog. This was a person to me. And he had this awful death where he ran around the house several times in panic, and he died on the front porch. So my father had read someplace that if you get the child involved in the burial, then it helps the child with grief. Well, it really helped me with grief. I had plenty of it. We picked him up on a blanket and carried him across the fields through the eucalyptus trees, and we had shovels on our shoulders, and we started digging a hole. And with every shovelful, I was crying harder until I just dropped the shovel and I was sobbing. So now my father realizes maybe this wasn't such a good idea. So he has to come up with something better now. So he looks down at me and he says, well, maybe we should have him stuffed. Now, I didn't know what this was. And I said, what does that mean? He said, well, you know, we'll take him to a taxidermist and he'll stuff him, and then you'll always be able to keep him. So I thought, well, that's better than putting him in this hole. So we put him in the car and we took him to a taxidermist on Hollywood Boulevard. Hollywood taxidermist. Now he's a cosmetic surgeon. So we bring him in, and there are all these birds sitting on branches, you know, really a weird story. Squirrels. And we take the dog and we put him on the counter, and the taxidermist, very studious guy, says, well, what kind of expression did he have on his face? I didn't know dogs had expressions, you know. I said he was a nice dog. He had a nice expression. I couldn't describe the dog's expression. So he said, I'll take care of it. So 6 weeks later, he sends the dog back to us. Now, by now, I've forgotten all about him. I was 8 years old, you know. 6 weeks is a long time for an 8-year-old. So he was all covered in butcher paper, and we take the butcher paper off, and he's sitting on a blue velvet board with a hideous expression on his face. He looks like, I can't do it. He looks like he's going to just tear your throat out. And he's got these 2 glass beady eyes, you know. So we put him in the living room by the fireplace. And guests would come into the house, and they'd walk in, they'd go into the living room, and they'd stop dead. Out of the corner of their eye, they'd see this animal sitting still, just staring at them. And with these glassy eyes and a look on his face. And they think, this dog is staring at my throat, you know. So I actually saw people back out of the room.